By the end of their journey, the Dragonborn is ridiculously powerful. According to Versus Battle, a truly reliable source, he's stronger than Perfect Cell, which... I mean, surely not. That guy can blow up solar systems. Either way, John Skyrim is really strong. Something that I covered in this video, so that must mean we clashed with some extremely powerful enemies. Sure, we curb stomped dozens of bandits, wolves and nameless dragons, but there are a few heavy hitters in the game that are way stronger in the lore than you probably realise, mainly because of Skyrim's presentation. And yes, we're looking mainly at the lore, because the question of who is the most powerful in-game is obvious. It's that bloody frost troll on the way to High Hrothgar, camping there like the boogeyman under my bed. The furry bastard, look at him, look at his stupid face. Go fussrow yourself. In all seriousness, let's quickly go over who the most powerful enemy in the game is from a mechanical standpoint, because it's pretty easy to answer. It's Karstaag, the ghost of the frost giant from Morrowind. He's level 90, hits like a truck of amphetamine, and cannot instantly be killed by the Wabberjack or Mehrunes Dagon, and cannot be paralysed. You may be thinking, what about the Ebony Warrior? But he only gets up to level 80. Sure, he can't be ragdolled, but he can get one shot by Mehrunes Razor, and that 10 level gap makes a big difference. Now, you could argue it's Alduin or Miraak, since both can get up to level 100 and level 150 respectively, but Alduin can be as low as level 10. And Miraak starts at level 35, so you don't need to be that strong to beat either of them. You can't physically fight the Ebony Warrior until you hit level 90, and if you fight Karstaag super early, it is going to be a rough time, whereas you're actually expected to eventually fight Alduin and Miraak, even though most of us don't actually do the main quest. Although their in-game power does not represent the firepower they're packing in the lore. So let's have a look at some candidates for Skyrim's most powerful enemy in the lore. Of course, there are a bunch of powerful entities that we have to fight within Skyrim. Vampires, dragons, dragon priests, possible gods and so on. As a result, I've prepared a shortlist of mighty foes that I think are worth talking about, and we'll get to the most powerful at the end of the video, with the added context from this shortlist, which includes Durnehviir, Archcurate Vyrthur, Harkon, Ancano, under very specific circumstances, Karstaag, the Ebony Warrior, Vahlok the Jailor, Miraak, and Alduin. I'm not looking at NPCs you can antagonise because they aren't really enemies. I would have to add the Sigic monks and the Greybeards to the list otherwise. I also chose these specific enemies as they loosely represent different categories of NPCs we meet, which will make sense soon hopefully. But enough messing about. Let's get started with Durnehviir.
There was a time when I called Tamriel my home.
Now, Eye of Durnehviir is the most powerful dragon that isn't Alduin. This might be a little bit of a controversial opinion, because I feel like most people would instead say that Paarthurnax is the second most powerful dragon. And yes, Paarthurnax can potentially be an enemy, so he could theoretically be on this list, but there are quite a few reasons why I put Durnehviir here instead. One is because of some Daedric cheating. Now, both have been kicking around since the Merethic era and haven't spent millennia being buried, so theoretically, Paarthurnax and Durnehviir are similar in age. And according to Curse of the Dragon over here, he was a big deal in Tamriel. According to him, he lived in a period when
the Dova roamed the skies, vying for their small slices of territory that resulted in immense and ultimately fatal battles.
He said he was a part of it, and the fact that he isn't dead and buried, slain by another Dover, means that he was probably an above average dragon at the time, maybe comparable to someone like Odahviing. He then gets a buff from the Ideal Masters, allowing him to use necromancy, and then gets stuck in the Soul Cairn guarding Valerica. Valerica actually gives us some context for how powerful Durnehviir is meant to be. Now she is meant to be an incredibly knowledgeable necromancer, probably at the master level of conjurer, who managed to find her way into the Soul Cairn without giving her soul, and is a daughter of Coldharbour, making her one of the most powerful vampires by default. Yet Valerica cannot comprehend the idea of defeating Durnehviir. This is the same woman that has effectively been in a stalemate against the Ideal Masters, yet she is stunned that the old dragon goes down, and while she put two and two together, realising that he was going to come back, it puts into perspective how powerful Durnehviir must be to keep someone as cunning as Valerica from doing basically whatever she wants. With dragon bones in her lab, it can be implied that she slew a dragon, which would then implicitly tell us how much stronger Durnehviir is compared to the average dragon. Now, this is all theoretical, and I'm not sure Valerica fought Durnehviir before she met us, so she might not have a strong first-hand account of his power. She probably saw a big undead dragon summoning a bunch of skeletons, and thought to herself, I'm not going to deal with that, I'm going to go hide in this castle before he tears me apart, which would be the logical thing to do. But here's the thing, Durnehviir's raw power doesn't matter that much. He just respawns almost instantly. He's practically a Dark Souls protagonist, except he's the size of a bus, breathes fire, and summons a literal skeleton crew. The only reason he lets us get away is that we're one of two people in the entire world who can summon him in Tamriel. If Durnehviir ever wanted to fight someone in the Soul Cairn, he could just keep going until he wins. And even then, I think it's debatable whether he can beat Paarthurnax without respawning because he has so many different powers at his disposal. With a respawn? I mean, lore-wise, I personally think that he's the strongest enemy we fight in Dawnguard, because you can't put him down. And in sheer raw power, he's magnitudes above Valerica. I mean, we're the Dragonborn. We are literally engineered to turn dragons into natural history museum displays, but we can't absorb his soul and put him down for good. The only other dragon's soul we couldn't absorb was Alduin's, and am I the only one who thinks Durnehviir is stupidly overpowered in the lore? Let me know. But while we're on a Dawnguard tangent, let's talk about Harkon and Vyrthur together.
My domain was vast, my riches endless, and my power infinite.
I was the arch-curate of Ariel, girl. I had the ears of a god.
Now you might be asking why we're slapping these two leeches together. Well, if you were to ask me to make a shortlist of the most powerful vampires in Skyrim, I would put Morvarth, or one of the Volkihar vamps at 5, Serana at 4, Valerica at 3, and then I'd have trouble deciding between 1 and 2, which would be Harkon or Vyrthur. You see, while Harkon is the final boss of Dawnguard, Vyrthur is the big bad, pulling the strings behind the scene. Harkon only being beaten by Auriel's bow is 100% a gameplay thing in my opinion. I don't think there's any reason we couldn't curb stomp him into ash without it in the lore. Now, Vyrthur isn't a pure-blooded vampire, like Harkon, so if we're only looking at their vampiric powers, Harkon is stronger. Yet this ice popsicle Mer has done some pretty crazy things. He somehow managed to manipulate a prophecy in the Elder Scrolls, and I'm not sure how that's possible. The Elder Scrolls are indestructible fragments of creation, outside of time and space, that tell events of the future and the past, so how did he do that? He also survived the Snow Elf Purge by Ysgramor and his boys, which has to count for something, considering that these are the same guys who purged frost giants from Skyrim, and whose lineage somehow won a war against the Dwemer. He also has the title of Arch-Curate, so I think it's fair to say that he would have been one of the most powerful snow elves even before he became a vampire. Then again, Harkon somehow managed to sacrifice 1,000 people to Miraak Bol before becoming a vampire, which, I mean, how did he do that? It isn't written in any book, so I'm assuming Dracula's less cool cousin managed to do that without anybody knowing. Huh. Now, to Vyrthir's credit, he did nearly manage to get revenge on a god, but even though these two are the top 2 vamps in Skyrim, they're both kinda chumps. Well, they wouldn't be in any other context, because both are genuine threats to the world. They both nearly blotted out the sun. Harkon is the top dog vampire in Skyrim, and Vyrthir created a plan and prophecy capable of threatening Auriel, who is also Akatosh, the same god who was summoned to go deal with Mehrunes Dagon in Oblivion, and that was seen as the last-ditch effort needed to deal with Dagon. But threatening a god is not the same as actually being on their level of power, and that kind of makes Harkon and Vyrthir lacking compared to some of the heavier hitters in this list. So let's move on to the black sheep of the group, Ancano.
I had hoped your scholars would be on a level comparable with my own colleagues. They are not.
You might be wondering, why in Oblivion is this Thalmor scrub here? Well, as much as nobody likes him, he's not a scrub. At least in the context of all of Tamriel. He's a decently powerful wizard, considering that he stands out among the Altmer people, known for their great magic. Sure, he'd get folded like origami by Harkon, turned into a chew toy by Durnehviir, and dropped from the top rope by Vyrthir. But I feel like Ancano slips in a tier below just the very best mages we meet in Skyrim, such as Neloth, Savos Aren, the dudes in the Sijic Order, and J'zargo. Yes, I slipped him in here, what are you gonna do about it? So you might be thinking that I've rattled off a bunch of mages better than Ancano, so again, why is he here? Well, he got control of the Eye of Magnus, and for that short stint, he was on par with a god. Maybe. We don't know what exactly the Eye of Magnus is, although I have seen some compare it to when Dagoth used the Heart of Lorkhan. This kind of makes sense if you believe the Khajiit and think that the Eye of Magnus is actually the eye of a god named Magus, a deity of sun and sorcery. We don't know enough about the thing, but I personally believe that it's somehow connected to a god, perhaps even an Aedra in some capacity, meaning that Ancano had near godlike powers before we rock up with the Staff of Magnus to show that Thalmor agent that magic is in fact for nerds. I'm unsure if Ancano achieved apotheosis, at least for a short period of time, which would have temporarily made him an actual god. Because if the Eye of Magnus can do some of what the Heart of Lorkhan could, it's theoretically possible. Now if you want to know more about apotheosis, I have a video here on Talos to explain it some more. But, in summary, Ancano could have potentially been godlike in power at one point. One very specific point, putting him pretty near the top. Without it, he's probably just an expert level mage, so put an asterisk next to him and let's move on. Now, Karstaag's status as Casper's very powerful and very angry uncle in-game carries over in the lore somewhat. Frost giants in general are a pretty mean bunch, although they went to war with Ysgramor and his boys, which is a bad idea if you've got something to do with frost or snow in your name, and were made nearly extinct. I believe the average frost giant is more powerful than the average giant, and if you've played Skyrim enough, you know that giants pack a punch. So I guess this puts into context how powerful Ysgramor is, which will come up later with a different entry. Still, Karstaag appears far later in history as a king of some Reeklings, before getting captured by a group of Hircine's hounds, essentially some really powerful werewolves. He then got put in a maze and was made the prey of a great hunt. To his credit, Karstaag had made it through most of the hunt, prepared to face Hircine's avatar. It isn't known if he would have won that fight because he ended up getting done in by the Durnehviir, who has an exceptional win rate against actual gods. So it's like fighting an uphill battle on ice. A win was never on the cards for Karstaag. When he gets revived as a ghost to fight the Dragonborn, that doesn't really help us either, because the Dragonborn also ends up defeating a god, which we'll get into later, so Karstaag is somewhere between stronger than most frost giants and weaker than god slayers. As I said, doesn't really help us. Granted, he was taken by Hircine's hounds, but he was also summoned by Hircine himself, so I'm not really sure we can use this to talk about Karstaag's strength either. Karstaag was considered worthy enough to be one of Solstheim's 3 champions, so that has to count for something, right? And perhaps he's stronger as a vengeful ghost, given that he's a super late game boss. Ultimately, it's tricky to fully gauge Karstaag's strength because of how much lore he lacks, and I'm not entirely comfortable with him being stronger than someone like Harkon and Vyrthur, but he's definitely not the strongest. So let's move on to the Ebony Warrior.
Except for you. You are my last challenge. Only you can send me to Sovngarde with honor.
We don't know a lot about the Ebony Warrior, but my headcanon is that he is one of 2 things. He is either the apex of what a relatively normal mortal can achieve naturally, or the avatar of a Redguard god of war, Raymond Ebonarm. Ebonarm is known to be clad in dark armour, and has an ebony sword fused with his right arm. He also has reddish blonde hair and steel blue eyes apparently, which the Ebony Warrior doesn't have. Now this is why I say the Ebony Warrior is potentially an avatar, not Ebonarm in person. If this is the case, he's got the power of a divine and obviously packs a huge punch. If not, he's just a monumental Chad with the powers of the voice, who can at least keep up with the Dragonborn. In many ways, I would perhaps compare an entirely mortal Ebony Warrior with Ysgramor, provided Skyrim's biggest elf killer isn't actually a dragon priest or dragon. Both have access to the Thu'um ebony armaments, since Walthrad is made from ebony, and are extremely competent warriors aiming for Sovngarde, so I think it's a fair comparison and says a lot about the Ebony Warrior that I can even make the comparison to begin with. And I'm not the only one doing it. The official Prima guide for Skyrim states that he is the mightiest warrior the country has seen since Ysgramor, which includes loads of warrior kings, with Olaf One-Eye being a major example, the one who defeated Numenix and put his skull in Dragon's Reach. He has access to 3-word shouts too, and can thus withstand them, making him extremely tough lore-wise. He could be the closest thing a regular mortal can get to challenging the gods, and while I don't think he would beat Alduin or Miraak, purely because he lacks the means to defeat Alduin and lacks Miraak's sheer variety, I believe he would canonically beat everyone else mentioned in detail thus far, provided we snatch the Eye of Magnus away from Ancano. With all that said, we're still guessing with the power and making some abstract theories. So let's get to someone who has a feat of strength we can actually visualise, and no character has one better than Vahlok the Jailor. In my opinion, Vahlok the Jailor is the most powerful dragon priest of his era, if we don't include Miraak, and even then it's debatable. For one major reason. Vahlok beat Miraak. You see, while Miraak was busy with his rebellion against the dragons, after asking for the Apocrypha library pass from Japan's wet dream over here, Vahlok caught on. He got his lizard squad together and battled it out with Miraak at his temple on Solstheim. While Vahlok probably had a numbers advantage, he got the better of Miraak, and the battle was so fierce that the region of Solstheim got separated from the mainland of Tamriel, and became an island. Yes, Solstheim is an island because the battle between Vahlok and Miraak went so hard that it exploded off of Skyrim. You could animate something like that in Dragon Ball, and people wouldn't bat an eye. This is particularly eye-opening because Dragon Priests don't seem all that remarkable when we fight them in game, but note that these guys were absolute units in the lore. Miraak had 3 Dragon Priests as part of his posse, and all 3 were imprisoned in Solstheim. The Dragon Cult as a whole was credited with imprisoning these Dragon Priests, although I believe it makes sense that Vahlok probably had something to do with this too, meaning that he could have gone 4-0 against fellow Dragon Priests, which includes Arzadar, probably the greatest mage of his era. Even after getting done in by us when he's all wrinkly, Vahlok ends up with 1 win and 1 loss against Dragonborns, and you have to be really damn powerful to have a record like that. It took an Elder Scrolls protagonist to break his monumental winning streak, and if it wasn't for Hermaeus Mora coming in to save Miraak at the last minute, we wouldn't even have the Dragonborn DLC. While all Dragon Priests pack some serious heat, Vahlok has the biggest gun of them all, and he's still not number 1. No, the number 1 spot belongs to one of 2 beings, and I think we all know who they are. Still, let's cover Miraak first.
And so the first Dragonborn meets the last Dragonborn at the summit of Apocrypha.
Miraak is the first Dragonborn, and is the closest thing we have to a true equal and rival. Obviously, he helped create an island through an explosive battle, but there are also a lot of signs that he might be stronger than us. Well, he straight up is on our first interaction in Apocrypha, basically dismissing us, but even after we learn the Bend Will and Dragon aspect shouts, I don't think we match Miraak's sheer power, at least with the Thu'um. He has a forward shout, which we are never able to learn, and that shout instantly turns dragons into a paleontologist's stream. That's right, he can one-shot dragons, has thousands of years of knowledge in Apocrypha, is an incredibly potent mage, and claims he could have beaten Alduin. Now, if you consider that he had us on our knees on our first meeting, and we could and probably should have beaten Alduin before this, he might not be bluffing, but we'll get into this later. I would even argue that no mortal has ever had Miraak's sheer command over the Thu'um with his forward shout, and he is probably the strongest Dragonborn ever until we absorb his soul, and thus take his power. You have to bear in mind that Hermaeus Mora couldn't deal with Miraak without us, and only manages to keep him trapped, with his escape inevitable. Until we come along. Miraak is an unstoppable force at this point, and we are the immovable object, but if he's so powerful, perhaps more powerful than we are at the time, why does he lose to us at the peak of Apocrypha? We're in his backyard, and he has 3 dragons to jump us. Well, my theory is basically ring rust. He hasn't really had a fight in over 4, maybe even 5,000 years. And we've spent almost every day since Helgen fighting up and down Skyrim. We're a honed axe, and he's a sword that needed some time on the whetstone. In terms of sheer power, I'm not prepared to say that we're Miraak's equal during this fight because of that forward shout. That's how much heat he's packing. But because we've been using all of our tools in fights against mighty foes, we're better at putting everything together. Sure, once we absorb his soul, we've surpassed him, even without a forward shout, but before then, he's probably the single most destructive enemy we face outside of Alduin. We also don't land the final blow. Tentacles McGee does, and he only does that after Miraak has been severely weakened during the fight. Now yes, he lost to Vahlok, but Vahlok's really strong as well, and he had the might of the Dragon Cult at his back, most likely. Meaning that things were scaled in his favour. I don't think he's actually stronger than Miraak one-on-one, but we don't have enough details about their fight to disprove that. Still, with all this Miraak glazing, There's a reason I'm talking about him now, because Alduin is the strongest enemy we face in Skyrim's lore.
Face me then, Alduin!
Alduin is the World Eater. He, individually, is Elder Scrolls' Ragnarok. Now, his power level depends on whether you think he was gearing up to eat the world at Solstheim, or whether he needed to be factory reset to become a World Eater, not a World Conqueror. In the former example, he's 100% stronger. But we don't know how exactly he would have eaten the world. I wouldn't be surprised if it becomes the size of a planet and starts munching away, although I have heard theories that he actually eats time. Either way, when Alduin is ready to eat the world, he's basically one of the most powerful beings in all of Elder Scrolls, gods and all, and since it has been implied that Alduin has ended the world before, no one can really stop him. Well, except us. Kind of. Again, it depends on the theory you believe in, but either way, Alduin is straight up a god. I know he's technically an offshoot of Akatosh, and his eldest child / shed skin, but he's a god. He's the dragon god in the old Nordic pantheon, and other cultures have names for him too, like Alkan in Khajiit lore. This makes the Dragonborn a godslayer, much like the Nerevarin before him. And as the only straight up godly being in Skyrim, it's pretty easy to put him as the most powerful adversary we face. You might then be asking, wait, if Alduin is the most powerful, why do you think Miraak could beat him? Well, for the same reason we could. Beating someone is not the same as being more powerful than them. For a sports analogy, think of Man City and Tottenham Hotspurs. Man City do everything better than Spurs. They have a better squad, more money, a better manager, more confidence, more winning pedigree in recent history, yet Spurs, no matter how bad they are, always cause City problems, routinely drawing or winning against them. We, and by extension Miraak, are the Spurs to Alduin's Man City. We are practically built to be dragon slayers, and while Alduin is a god, he is also a dragon. Had Miraak partnered up with the Sovngarde trio back in the day, and then learned Dragonrend, he probably could have beaten Alduin. In modern times, it would have been tougher, since I'm pretty sure he wouldn't be able to learn Dragonrend, but he's got so many ways to give Alduin problems. He could use Bend Will on Alduin's servants, and has an auto-delete dragon button with his forward shout. Yes, this probably wouldn't work on Alduin, but he is built to slay dragons like us, and is thus Alduin's kryptonite. Still, as a god and a world eater, Alduin is the most powerful enemy we face in game, especially because he has the potential to grow exponentially stronger. At the end of a Kalpa, the world cycle, nothing will stop Alduin from eating the world. We were just lucky it wasn't time yet.
I think he likes me, so he's trying to mimic.
Wait a minute, who likes you? Who likes you?
He likes me. He likes me.
You know, they have the rumors that say that one of us is the imposter. You know.
I don't know who's the imposter, but I.
Thank you all for watching. This will be coming out on the Chinese or Lunar New Year. I call it the Chinese New Year because as someone who is ethnically Chinese, that is what I will be celebrating. I guess it's appropriate that we ended up speaking about a dragon, although it's the year of the horse. I probably should have found a way to talk about Shadowmere. Nah. Just look at this picture of China using Draco Malfoy to celebrate instead. I mean, it's brilliant. So, have a good year of the horse, and enjoy entering a very Chinese part of your life if you want to get involved with the celebrations. I guess not a lot of changes for me, but maybe this will be the year Bethesda show us something to do with the Elder Scrolls 6. Who knows? I guess it depends on how much Todd loves horses. I mean, we all know that he loves making money off horse armour. Either way, I hope you enjoyed. Like, comment, sub, you know by now, and maybe I'll see you in another video.
The wolf bore its fangs and spread its claws and tore at its own hide. Drink the blood and become my sons, or by dawn you'll never survive. And so the pack was born again as the Wolves of Jorrvaskr, to rule in life and serve in death as the moonlight's bound hunter. And so the pack was born again as the Wolves of Jorrvaskr, to rule in life and serve in death as the moonlight star.